And as many of you know that have fished all spring, the bait has been crazy. We've had small rain bait all the way up to adult bunker, herring, whatever. The usual smorgasbord of bait, but in not like in past years, we've had 10 times the amount of bunker and which are Atlantic menhaden, and they're adult Atlantic menhaden, and they've been really producing the bite. And it's really difficult to produce a bite when there's a lot of Atlantic menhaden around, because what happens is the bass get really full and then they kind of just hang out deeper in the water. But if you can find a spot where there are Atlantic menhaden schools pretty far offshore, and you have a bass that is hungry, that hasn't really been on those schools of bait, and maybe it was a little earlier in the week, but then they kind of lose those schools of bait and then they come into the rocks to feed. And I have this one spot that every single bass I catch there is long and skinny. And it's funny because I've got bass that are almost 50 inches long, and they're 49 inches, and they're 45 to 48 pounds. Like they're heavy. They're like heavy fish, but they have the capability of almost being 60 pounds if they're full of bunker or whatever. And that's the thing. Like you catch a bass that's 50 inches, you can pretty much, that fish could be in the high 50s, and 49 inches is not that much smaller. But that's what I'm trying to say, is that spot produces very long, very, hungry fish. And it does it for the spring. And then I have another spot, which is a little bit more south, that I fish. And these are all very copied, tried and true locations that have certain structure that produces lots of current and lots of wave sweep, lots of white water. And the big bass like to hang out in that white water, and they really love to eat those disoriented, easy meals in that white water. And if you throw an eel in there, it's going to get smashed, and it's going to get smashed by a bass that could be 50, 60 pounds. In a spot like that, I have dreams, and the dreams are that I can get into a bass that's in the mid to high 50s pounds in those spots. And I fish with gear that is so strong and so heavy that I feel like I could easily overpower any big bass in that area, and even up to ridiculously big bass. And it showed when I was fighting those 35 and 40-inch bass, just because I was fighting them and I could have held them, and they could have not pulled a click of drag if I wanted them to. And it's just extraordinary to me that I can fish with gear for a bass with gear with that strength. And believe me, I've seen people, I've been next to somebody that was fishing with I was fishing with somebody that had a Daiwa dogfight. And what they did is they locked the drag on the Daiwa dogfight all the way down, I'm talking whatever it is, 50, 60 pounds of drag, locked it down. And they hooked a 40-pound bass, and it peeled 30 yards of line out. So it just shows you that even though I'm fishing with a Van Staal VSX 275, big with 80-pound leader, and I measured the drag. I have a whole video, or podcast rather, that I did measure the drag on that Van Staal, and I think it was 25. I think 25 was what it was. And or maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure, but still 25 pounds of drag, that's a lot. It's nothing compared to the dogfight though. And when you think about a bass of that caliber still pulling 20 yards at line, that's not that much for a fish like that, but still, that's a lot of line at very heavy drag. So when you're thinking about fighting a bass that's 55 pounds, 53 inches, or even 50 inches rather, then that fish is going. You want to have gear that you can trust that's not going to break in a rock.